I'm Teresa Carraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. I'm doing a quick and lots of background noise video today on my way out of town. This is called Parasites, the First 5,000 Years. I tried to call it parasitism, but after 3 tries, I still couldn't pronounce it. This is obviously based on David Graeber's Debt, the First 5,000 Years. And I think that concept of debt and parasites are entirely related, because what else is debt other than parasites who are pulling and sucking our labor out from us and our communities? I'll be explaining the 5 rules of global parasites, and then I'll be going into some examples of each of those. Let's get started. Here are the 5 rules. First, the words, then the world. Create a god in your own image. 2. 3. Coin the realm to own it. 4. Create chaos. Divide to conquer. And 5. Impose solutions to problems you cause. First the words, then the world, and I'll look at 5 different points within this. First, if the metaphysics of one mind dreaming are correct, then words create reality. They create not ultimate reality, but the reality of our perception. And so the fact that they have changed the names means that they are changing reality, and that is something that we can also do, and something we need to take possession of. So when the Bible says, in the beginning was the Word, those are the words that we need to make sure that we are owning and being conscious of. Second, Latin, which is the root of all of our languages of conquest, is an entirely synthetic language. It had no mother tongue. And that's because 3, Rome started as a military outpost. It had no women. In order to procreate, they had to kidnap and rape the women. This changes the entire language, of course, and has created this artificial language that casts spells. And all words are casting spells. They are spell binding or they are spell freeing, and we need to possess the latter. 4, Ashkenazi Yahwist, which is how we should always define the religion, derive only their male DNA from the Middle East, according to Test. Was that another military outpost? Is that why only the male DNA comes from the Middle East and not the women who they say were native to Germany and the Ukraine and different places like that? And then last, Ron Unz has a theory that the origin of Ashkenazi Yahwist in the Middle East was Phoenician. So I would add that that's where our alphabet comes from. That's where our entire written language comes from. And I think that's an important clue. 2, make a god in your image. The god that is sociopathic and parasitic is Yahweh, based on reading what's in the Torah and what it says about that God. So what draws a people to worship of that God if they're not forced to, which they often were by their rulers? That's something I think we need to unravel by never taking the word Jew at face value, looking at it as a puzzle piece that we always need to flip over, because it combines a religion, an ethnicity, a license for land and territory, and also a genealogy. So we need to know which of those it really is in order to place it in the right color category and solve this puzzle. At thirdparadigm.substack.com, I have a link to Matt Orfalia's excellent 3-minute video on the laws of war. And this has some very heartrending images of what's happening in Palestine right now. Now, you have to go from there to YouTube because YouTube has made it age restricted because, as we all know, preteens are desperate to watch fathers who are sobbing over their murdered children, and they have to be directed back to sexually inappropriate content. And then I have an article, thanks to Greg, who goes by Walking the Dog, who referred me to, for every Jewish Zionist, there are 30 Christian Zionists, and Netanyahu exploit this. From this, the Israeli government, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, continues to employ an unapologetic rhetoric, invoking biblical references to sell his war to the ultra-right, not just in Israel, but also in the U.S., where he is enjoying the support of a Christian evangelist, a majority of whom identify with the global Zionist movement for a Jewish homeland. Their belief comes from the end-of-world interpretation of the Bible leading to the second coming of Jesus Christ. This belief is not just theological, but also has created significant support for Israel in the political circles of the United States. Under the Donald Trump regime, evangelists took their seats in the power corridors with the likes of Vice President Mike Pence and U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. In fact, Donald Trump also mentioned in a rally that the move to shift the U.S. Embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem was for the evangelicals. Even the current U.S. President, Joe Biden, has publicly identified himself as a Zionist, and at least 100 members of Congress are avowed evangelicals. TRT World spoke to Stephen Sizer, the former vicar of the Church of England, a peace activist authoring 3 books on the Christian Zionist movement and its support for the State of Israel. Sizer was recently banned from licensed ministry in the Church of England until 2030 for his views on Zionism and Israel's policies in the Middle East. Stephen said, "Christian Zionism is actually the dominant form of Zionism. It has been since before the Zionist movement emerged in the 1870s, 1880s. There were Christians calling for the restoration of the Jews to Palestine from the 1820s, 1830s, and the Balfour Declaration, with the demise of the Ottoman Empire, that Britain's entry, if you like, into the Middle East, having defeated the French, was to colonize Palestine. And he saw the role of the Jews as serving the best interest of the British Empire. Christian Zionism predates Jewish Zionism by at least 50 years, and today dominates the Zionist movement at least 10 to 1, probably nearer 20, 30 to 1. For every Jewish Zionist, there are 20 or 30 Christian Zionists, and therefore Netanyahu knows he needs the Christian, particularly the Christian right in America, Canada, Sweden, Holland, and in much of Europe, in order to maintain his position and to continue the expansion of the Zionist agenda in Palestine." And I continue on Substack with another quote from him, but this is really important, that when people are saying, oh, we don't agree with the Judaism and Zionist view, but they still are buying into the other Abrahamic religions, Christianity as they call it, which should really be a cult of Jesus, because it already assumes that Christ is one person, not all of us. And also Islam. These are not good ways to push back against that. We need to push back on the basis of morality as something that always supersedes religion. 3. Coin the realm to own it. I go into great detail about the origin of coinage and taxation and how they're tied to conquest and slavery in my book going back 3,500 years. Thanks to Tyrion, who recommended The Great Taking by David Webb, I've included that video also on the Substack. So David Webb, if I'm remembering correctly, is a former high-level securities analyst. He's always been in financials and looking at what's going on. He has been horrified to recognize that there is something very insidious that's happening. In this video, David Webb talks about many things that I talk about in my book. He talks about the velocity of money, which I call the speed of egress, how fast it gets siphoned out and how few times it changes hands in between. He looks at mortgage tranches and how our mortgages have all been put together into these financial instruments that get bought by the thousands by these large funds, and how the things you think you own may not be your possession, even if you don't have debt on them. That our securities, for instance, are held in clearinghouses, in online databases, where they can be disappeared. Even our bank accounts can end up, if you look at your statement, if you look at what you signed when you open that, it says you essentially bought shares. You don't own that money. They don't owe it to you in the case of a foreclosure or a bankruptcy of the bank. If that happens, you're left with nothing. And the same thing for our stocks, that they are collateral for these big finance firms to gamble on, to essentially get back money so that they place them as collateral. And that means those who have loaned them money end up owning that collateral if things go down, as they are bound to because of the derivatives market, which is, I think, 600 times all of the GDP of the world combined. So we are in a very fragile state. His solution is that you should talk to all the CEOs you know, because they may seem intimidating, but really they're just real people. And these people at the next levels down, if you can convince them of what's going on, they're going to pay attention and care about it. So I don't know CEOs, but I also am not going to count on them in order to solve this problem. I think that the solution that I have, which is one that is community-based, in which we take back the banks, is the only one that's going to work. And what he's saying, I think, will come true, because things are going to fall apart, I believe, at the level that he's talking about. And only then, maybe, people will be ready for a solution that works for everyone. 4. Create chaos. Divide to conquer. From Pepe Escobar's Russia and China Have Had Enough, he writes, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi went straight to the point. He called for SCO members to maintain their strategic autonomy and never allow external forces to turn Eurasia into a geopolitical arena. Wang Yi detailed how a few countries are pursuing hegemony and power, forming small cliques, establishing hidden rules, engaging in interference and suppression, decoupling and cutting off ties, and even assisting the three forces in the region, thus attempting to suppress the strategic autonomy of the global south. The three forces in Chinese code are terrorism, separatism, and religious extremism. Actually, the three main reasons for the foundation of the SCO way back in 2001, a short while before 9/11. The straightforward translation of Wang's message points to Beijing being very much aware of the hegemon's myriad hybrid war tactics now deployed all across the heartland. Still, Beijing excels in politeness, calling for common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security cooperation and to work with the international community. So this looks at these tactics, which include false flag events going back for centuries. And I also include a link to the Corbett report on the Rwandan genocide is a lie. And that's very interesting if you're not aware of how that whole narrative has been created and the fact that Tutsis and Hutus are an artificial class divide that was exploited and created by the colonizers. And last, 5, impose solutions to the problems you cause. For most of us, we are so aware of the Great Reset and all of those solutions that they are ready to shove down our throats. So I want to talk about the fact that they are not the only ones who can devise solutions. And recently, Gabriel of Libre Solutions Network has put out another edition in What is Digital Autonomy? Gabriel is one of my heroes because he always has such a clear perspective on what the problems are and goes right for what it is that we can do. So I don't know whether this is the right time for that, but what it shows me is that there are people out there who absolutely know what it is that we can be doing and how we can do it. And that gives me so much hope. And to follow up, here is the Reset's 3 agendas, although I think I've expanded that to 5 since this video. And this is reversing the reset and what it is that we can do. Thank you for watching.